Thank you. Yeah, we thought we'd do something different. Shub and I met about a month ago now, and realized between the two of us, we've got a lot of lessons learned and a lot of things that we might want to share. So we thought, instead of a panel where we skate across issues, we thought we'd go deep. And I'll probably end up being a player coach slash interviewer slash interviewee on this. So I'm going to let Shub introduce himself, and then I'll give you a bit more about my background so you know the context that we're both talking about. So over to you, Shub.
Thanks, Ray. That was a very nice way of saying I met Shub and realized he talks more than three people. So it wasn't
exactly what I meant.
a panel. Hello, everybody. Shub Sidhu. So I am head of strategy and head of Canada, which is new market entry for Zayzoon, even though we're a Canadian company. We'll talk probably a bit about that later today. My entire career has been in various roles at tech companies as an operator, so not a founder. So you're going to hear me pick Ray's brain a little bit on that. Operating on the growth side, so from almost zero to revenue to 8, hopefully 9 digits soon in revenue. Yeah, just happy to get very, very specific to Ray's point and talk through some of that journey from startup to product market fit to scaling.
Yeah, and that's the general structure. We're going to do this is we're going to walk through those stages, and so just a little bit more about me, so you can know where I'm coming from. So I had the luckiest day of my life when I joined a little company called RIM in Waterloo, and just before we launched BlackBerry, so got to go through perhaps one of the more infamous scale-ups in Canada. So lots of lessons learned on the way up, and then I left, and then it fell apart. So I'll let you draw the conclusions, but I left to start my own. So went through the journey of doing it again. Obviously, we didn't get the same ending that RIM did in a positive way. I mean, we got a good ending. We got an exit to Intel, but we weren't Canada's most valuable company for a short period of time. Also sit on a few boards. So I'm going to be drawn on all that. And my day job allows me to do a whole lot of reading and engaging with startups and scale ups. So I'll draw on that as well. So why don't we start, Shub, talking about this early stage stuff? And I think it's important for people to understand the difference at each stage, because you can often feel like, I'm killing this one stage, I'll just keep killing it into the next stage. And there's so many changes that happen. So yeah, maybe using Zayzoon or using other experiences. Yeah, why don't you give us a bit of a sense of how that early stage works as you're figuring out product market fit?
Yeah. I know maybe it's silly, but I do like to get like very specific in terms of customer number counts when you're talking about starting up. I think there's this, there's this founder journey, the concept of an idea, initially getting funded. I'm not going to talk too much about that. Like what we talk about is, okay, we got one customer, right? So there's some sort of validation that what we're doing is a thing that exists. Now what, right? And I always really define that very, very first early phase is, if you're a B2B company, let's call it the first 12 customers is always the number that I use. And if you're B2C, let's call it 100, right? 100 to 200, somewhere in that range. And the really, really, really critical thing about that is that as a founder, that is entirely your responsibility. So like, you or one of your co-founders has to be able to sell those first 10, 12 clients. I don't know what the distribution of folks on this call today, if there's founders, early operators, but I will say, like, if you're a single founder and you can't do that, you don't know how to sell those first 10 clients, get a co-founder who does, right? You're not going to go hire a salesperson. There has to be a founder who can run that play for those first, like the sales play for the first 10 to 12 B2B clients, and let's call it the marketing or product play for the first couple hundred B2C clients. Has to be founder. Has to.
And I would add to that, the reason, and again, we want to get to scaling quickly, but the reason it has to be the founder is you're still trying to figure out whether you have anything that people care about. So
Yes.
this is your opportunity to change your product, to change your pricing, to change everything about what you're
In the
doing.
room, you have to be able to change it in the room.
Exactly. And you can't outsource that to, a trusted salesperson or anything. So,
Ray, before we move on, you know what I'm going to ask you about. So
uh,
you founded like post RIM,
I,
you told me the story, right?
yeah, it's probably for the next phase, but I'll tell it now.
Yeah.
So I actually don't like selling. There's a lot of people that I'd be in that book. But I was successful at getting us to $1 million through, about 8 to 10 customers. And then I'm like, oh, thank God, now I'm going to hire a salesperson. And that salesperson went out and for about 4 months, and I told them, go out, get them all hot. I'll come in and help close it, very arrogant. So he went out, got nobody hot. And then I showed up at a board meeting, and we had investors at this point. And one of my investors said, Ray, if you don't spend the next 3 months on a plane, we will get ourselves a new CEO. And so that was a wake-up call to be, first of all, threatened in your own business. So I went out on the very first call with this salesperson, and it was actually with Sony, Japan. We can go to Japan, but they didn't want what we had, but they needed something 5% different. And we closed a $200,000 deal on the spot just because I said, yeah, we can do that. And the salesperson wasn't empowered to do that. And it was a classic mistake, right? This person sold at IBM. He was a leading salesperson at IBM, which had no resemblance to what we were. But I fell into this trap of I need a professional salesperson. And we, at some point maybe we did, but that was certainly not the point. So
yeah, but you did those first 8 or 10 deals largely yourself, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny, you don't feel like you're selling at that point. You feel like you're partnering, you're discussing problems and solutions, and that stuff all felt, I was the product guy. That felt very comfortable.
Great. That's all selling. That's what selling is.
I get it now. This is why I should go back and do it again, because I understand all that now. And how in that early phase, this whole thing is about customer acquisition, but
Yeah.
as you're acquiring customers early on, how do you figure out things like pricing, especially B2B?
I think even before, yeah. So you kind of, how do you acquire, first of all, I think
Sure.
is part of that discussion.
That's a good point.
But like, I talk to a lot of like really early stage startups, and it's always like, first question I ask is, did you write down, I don't care if it's on a piece of paper, the exact process for how you acquired those first 10 or 12 customers? And they'll say, no, we know how I acquired them. And I'll go, okay, Ray was your first customer. How'd you get to Ray? Oh, yeah. A guy I knew talked it. And I was like, no, specific as possible. It was like, okay, I went to this one event. I talked to this person who worked at this company. Because they worked at this company, they were part of this association. They introduced me to this. And I was like, start writing that down. Write down those entire sequence of steps, because you're starting to build your playbook very, very early stages. So like those first 10 customers you acquire, like I want like an essay almost of like the level of detail. And the reason is, and I'm going to get to your question in a sec here, Ray, but like along that journey, you're going to learn a lot about how people operate, how they buy, where they buy, and what they're empowered to buy. And that's going to start to actually inform your pricing, because everyone just always assumes that pricing is dictated purely by value, right? Which is true. I mean, there's like an immense amount of value that you're applying to your product. And as such, that's how you determine what you think it's going to be worth to somebody. But there's also like what they're prepared and able to spend on a thing. And what I mean by that is like one of my early places that I worked, we built apps on top of enterprise systems that made things easier for people. I could put literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of value on those apps because of the value that they save people. People who are in the buying decision or the seats to make those decisions did not have budgets that would support 100 million, like a $1 million annual like SaaS piece of software. So what you determine pricing by is going, okay, first I'm going to put together a value calculator. Here's what I think this is worth to you, because I've talked to all of my customers every single day, and I know that Ray's saving this much time, or this much more convenient, or he's able to ship this much more product, or he's able to do something that generates more revenue or increase margin for his business, right? And I'm using that to go, okay, this is what I think this product is worth. Then with those first 10 clients, I'm sitting in the room and going, here's what I think this product is worth. I'm trying to figure out what you're able to spend the whole time. And I think I've told you this story, Ray, that like a couple of, and when I say a couple, I mean more than once, I've made this pricing decision in the room. And I wasn't a founder, but I was empowered. Like when you're the first non-founding acquisition person, you also are somewhat empowered. I would say to Ray, we talk about it, and I would say, well, what's the pricing, Shub? And I'd say, okay, from a licensing perspective, this is 4T. And depending on Ray's reaction, I would either say $40,000 a year or $14,000 a year. And that's 100% true. I've done that multiple times in my career, because the why 40 and 14 is because you can pivot between the two. You can't do that if it's 20. You can't, I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous. It's 100% a real strategy that I've used. And we had like a series of early customers, half of whom were paying 40 and half of whom were paying 14. So I was like, okay, what we're going to charge for this is somewhere between 40 and 14. So that's on the B2B side. B2C side, one of the neatest things that I've ever seen from a product perspective in the B2C realm is from a tool called Vengage. Vengage, like a design tool, kind of like a light, not as successful Canva. You'd sign up, you'd pay 18 bucks a month or whatever, 20 bucks a month. You go to cancel. Let's say, oh, it was like, I only use this once to do this one artifact, so I'm gonna bail out. On my way out, they'd be like, hey Ray, what if it was $15 a month? And or Shub, in this case, it wasn't Ray, sorry. Hey Shub, what if it was 15 a month? I'd be like, no, it's not worth it. What if it's 12 a month? No. What if it's 9 a month? I was like, oh man, for 9 a month, I might just keep this handy in case I need it. So like there are really like, people don't survey customers about what they would pay literally through the course of the checkout. Like if you're in a B2C scenario, like make them click on a button to pay. It's going to heavily inform your pricing strategy. Now, again, a lot of people will challenge some of that because your unit economics have to work. Like there is also an absolute finance element to what you do. We're a fintech, so margin and unit economics are incredibly important. So I can't just arbitrarily set pricing, right? But there is a pricing sensitivity that is informed by the target margin you eventually want to get to. But early days, your costs are not going to be scaled, right? So like let's say if you're fintech and your transaction costs to send money are $1, but at scale they're going to be 5 cents. Okay, we'll model your pricing at 5 cents. Don't model at $1 because you can't, you probably can't position your product in that sense. So there's the actually asking your customer in the B2B scenario to execute on an agreement that has a price in it and be prepared to be very variable. And then on the B2C side, like you just get them to click on a button that says buy. Obviously, you have to have a pricing structure model in place that's going to make you profitable at some point. But yeah, a lot of that early stage pricing, I don't know if you agree with all that, Ray, is like it's like able to make that call in the room, right? Like sometimes.
Yeah, and I think you can, a finance-driven pricing sometimes is necessary.
Yeah.
However, then as sales and marketing professionals, our job is to figure out what is the market that will bear that price. And if there isn't a market, then we have a structural problem and we have to go back to square one to figure out how we lower a price. But you don't go to somebody who needs a low cost solution with a high cost,
Totally.
not high priced, a high cost offering.
Acquisition is the hardest thing you will ever do in your business when you're getting your first customer or your millionth customer. It's the hardest thing to do. And that's not because that's what I do. I've done a lot of the jobs. It's not diminishing the value of every single other job in the organization, but it is the hardest thing to do, to go out, get somebody to be interested in a product that's new in a category that's potentially new. Like, you're out there pitching something no one's ever even heard of, let alone your own product. Acquisition And so your pricing, to your point, Ray, has to allow you to acquire.
Yeah.
You can optimize everything after pricing. Like, you know, if our pricing at Zayzoon has been similar, but our economics have improved because of scale, because we got better, because we figure out ways to optimize this part of the tech, right? Like optimization is an easier thing to do.
Yeah.
Acquisition is a harder thing to do. So I always index to acquisition because there's great optimizers that can sort of see a problem and solve for it if the machine's already going. It's really hard to go find people who can like start the machine in the first place.
There's a really good article. We'll move on from early stage, but there's a good article by First Round Capital, I think they're called, who do a lot of investments, early investments, and it's the most nuanced view of what a product market fit is that I've ever read, and it really acknowledges that, you know, the first thing, all you want is happy customers, satisfied customers, and, you know, perhaps you can't make money off of them or as much money as you wanted, but that is step one in any kind of product market fit. Step two is then seeing, and you want a handful of them. Step two is seeing a bit of a demand coming through the door for that offering that you have. And step three is when you get into efficiency. And I think, you know, when you, and this is, again, this is from the perspective of a venture capitalist who wants you to ask for more money. So that might not be everyone who might be bootstrapping and needs to make money on customer number one. But it's just an interesting perspective on, you know, make sure you have satisfied customers early as you possibly can, or nothing else matters. So.
Yeah, I mean, Tate, who founded Zayzoon, that's been his thing from the get-go. It's like obviously acquisition over everything. That's how I feel about everything. You can't acquire unless you have happy customers, because you acquire back based on, you know, talk about where those first 10 clients come from. In a startup that I get interested in, 3 at least come from one of your first 7 saying, hey, I met this other person and I talked to them about it, right? Like, and so, yeah, 20-30% referral rate is a reflection of people really enjoying your product, enjoying your service delivery. Service delivery is part of your product, especially in B2B, right? Like, so yeah, 100%. I think that's a great point. I'd like to read that article.
So the so some old traditional advice is always sell in your backyard.
Yeah.
And you guys are what Zayzoon is what I would call a born global company.
Yeah.
You did not sell to your backyard.
Yes.
How was that decision made? Go to the US before Canada.
Yeah, Tate and Darcy are fabulous at telling this story, but like we were in Canada initially. So, you know, we had one initial partner that we partnered with. We were operating in Canada briefly. There's only like 7 of 8 of us at the time. They went down to a trade show in the US and came back with more partners interested in the space of a day than they'd been able to grind through in a year in Canada. And the element of the backyard piece that we were able to sort of capitalize on is 2 of the folks who came on early, one of whom now leads sales and success at Zayzoon. He came from that network, right? He had been in that network working with those payroll partners. So we were able to get kind of, whether it wasn't, while it wasn't, you know, the founders, Jamie, Tate, Darcy's geographic backyard, they were able to bring someone on a really early stage who was connected to the backyard. I guess I'm losing the analogy here. Listen, I mean, that whole backyard thing really, I think, is right notionally. I think that in this country, like, most of us kind of look south of the border first, like, because I think the market's usually more interested or more ready for something that might be different. We're a little more risk averse up here as buyers. I think that Canadians we don't buy quick, right? Like, and when you're a startup, you gotta get to know quick too, right? You gotta get to yes quick, you gotta get to know quick. And so, yeah, a lot of us end up gravitating south of the border because we know we can get to product market fit, or the understanding of whether we have product market fit, faster, right? it's not just that it's a bigger market, it's kind of bit culturally. So to answer your question, we tried the backyard, and then next door, party was party was party was more interesting next door, I guess, right?
Yeah.
We made
Oh,
friends.
it's,
I'm losing this whole
I
analogy, but
know, but I've heard from, healthcare is a great example. Any healthcare app, they will have customers all over the world, but they will not have Alberta Health Services.
yeah,
And it's just a reality. There's also a trap that when Canadian companies sell to Canada first, they hit the ceiling
yeah,
because Canada is a small market.
yeah,
Yet they've built out a culture, a network, connections, everything in Canada alone. So it's really difficult now to enter a new
yeah.
market. Whereas, you immediately have a 10x size market likely in the US. So
Yeah, we've definitely gone backwards. Like we built our entire business this 6 years. So the first 5.5 years were 100, well, except a brief foray down there, but 100% US based. We just announced that we're launching in Canada
yeah,
a few weeks ago. And what's interesting about what you just said is like, it's actually an entirely different initial sort of go-to-market play, which is really heavily leaning into our brand and our network. We have a bigger brand in a weird way in Canada than we do in the US, just be from the ecosystem perspective. So it is really interesting now making like kind of going in reverse. And we'll see if it works. But yeah,
yeah,
it becomes also like a cross-border play, right? You can serve organizations that span the border and stuff too. But yeah, that's a really great question about the backyard and us not starting in the backyard first. But listen, the way we determine that is we talked earlier about 10 clients. For us, it was partners that we want to go to market with. The guys came out with 20 partner opportunities from a couple of shows, and we're like, this is like a business case nuanced decision. They identified the opportunity and they were like, this feels right. Like this is
yeah.
what we're going to do, right?
So so let's shift gears a bit. And so Zayzoom, whatever the company we're talking about, is hit the point where there is demand. You
Yeah.
do have a product everybody wants. You're now looking to scale customer acquisition.
Yeah.
And you start talking about, we got to hire people, and we
Yeah.
don't want to make the mistake Ray made.
Yeah.
And maybe you were that person that Zayzoon hired.
Yeah.
But any thoughts on the kind of person you need to
Yeah.
hire at that stage?
Yes. I got lots. Um, okay. I mean, listen, there's like probably a million ways to do this right and a million ways to do this wrong. So take everything I'm about to say with like my own personal perspective. A lot of people make the mistake you made, Ray. Like I'm not a sales guy. I'm going to go get a salesperson. She has sold for 20 years. She is going to be able to sell my thing. I always am like, nope. That's like for me, and there can be people who could do that, but it's always a huge red flag because they might be fabulous at selling things. They are fabulous at selling things that exist. You have something that even if you've got 10 clients, doesn't really exist yet, right? Like, so what you are looking for is, you said something really interesting earlier, Ray, that you were looking for someone to open because you're a great middler. Like Jason Lemkin talks about this a lot. Founders are incredible middlers, right? Like they can take a open deal to almost the end and then they need some help closing it, right? But they can tell that story and walk you through like the entire journey, right? So you're basically looking for two things, right? Really early stage. Who can help me open, right? And then who can also middle, right? So first of all, if you're a founder and you think you're hiring your first two salespeople and suddenly you're going to get 16 hours your week back, nope. You should be going from spending 16 hours a week selling to 32 hours a week selling, right? Like it's just now 16 of your hours are making sure that your 2 or 3 people are really enabled. So like, okay, so let's talk about the journey. Well, how are you going to drive demand is the first question, right? And so that's going to inform the first hire because without, like I talked about earlier, without demand, there's no point in doing what you're doing. Now, some folks will go the route of we're going to go get 2 we think we have something, even though it's early, we have 2 SDRs, we're going to go bang on phones all day, bang on phones, bang on emails, just outreach, 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 outreach. That's been the traditional approach. It's not bad, right? It's expensive over time. It's not bad. I really lean into the first one. How can they drive demand the same way that you drove those first 10, right? Like, again, that's why when I said write every single scenario down in like exhaustive detail about how you got those first 10 clients, that's going to help determine who is going to help drive demand. In Zazian's case, Tate Darcy found some partners. Shane was one of the first sales hires because he knew how to get the business development or marketing agreement in place with those partners. Right? He could go find, hey, they had 10 partners. He could go find another partner a week that was willing to commit to at least partnering with this. Him and I basically, well, he started earlier than I did, but we sort of started at this around the same time, because then I knew how to get a partner to drive demand, right? So he could go get the partner, which was the first part of the funnel. I go get the partner to get demand out to their clients and employees. So between the two of us, we were driving the top of that funnel and the demand play while also starting to carry stuff down through. So 2 people, I always like whatever that looks like. If it's 2, if you're going to go an SDR play, go 2. If you're going to go a channel play, go 2. If you're going to go, whatever you're going to do, make the investment to hire 2. Why hire 2? Ray hired 1 person. Again, person's probably fabulous, probably left Ray and went on to continue to have a very successful sales career. But if Ray had 2 people, one say with a background from IBM and one who was just was like Ray, was like mini Ray, basically just a founder without the risk profile, the wherewithal, or the experience to found a company, he probably would have seen in 3 months that this person was bringing Ray into way more meetings than this person. Right? So what we're testing is, do I have product? Do I have a market? Can I sell it? If you have 1 person trying to sell it, you have not answered the question if it's the product or the market or the salesperson, because you have nothing to compare it to, right? So like 2 people doing the gig. In Shane and I's case, we were doing slightly different things, which were heavily complementary. And that really worked. That's not the scenario depending on your go-to-market, but like 2 people. Like 2 people so that is it the person I hired or is it the fact that my product stinks, right?
Yep. I mean, I think we chatted earlier about this concept of running experiments and understanding if it fails, what did I learn? And when you run an experiment with 1 sales rep, I don't know what I learned.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I had a board member who knew who knew what to learn.
Yeah. Well, listen, people talk about growth and experiments and startups. And I guarantee you 90% of the people on this call, if you are currently running an experiment at work, you are not running an experiment. You are trying something. And so an experiment has a hypothesis, has an expected outcome, has the variables, ideally 1 variable, right? That moves throughout the course of the experiment, and it has an outcome and it's time boxed. And so like when we talk about that, like this is going to sound so stupid, but I'm going to say it anyway. The biggest problem when founders hire salespeople is too much patience. The second biggest problem is they're too impatient, right? So and the reason they're too impatient is because they don't understand that, because you didn't write down how long it took for those first 10 deals, what that cycle is going to look like, right? So and you don't understand the checkpoints along the way to know the cycle. If you were in a B2B shop, generally, you don't know if a salesperson is successful from a revenue standpoint for a year, right? If you were a startup and you wait for a year to know if someone driving revenue for you to be successful you will not be a startup anymore. You will be an out of business startup. So you have to understand those checkpoints at 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. There has to be signs of life. But as a founder, you have to train yourself and learn enough about running salespeople that you know what to look for those signs of life, right? And so if again, Ray, to your point, you were lucky to have someone like a mentor or board person who was like, hey man, you don't have the signs of life, right? Like you had to dig yourself back in. But that has to be a part of it, right? Experiments involve outcomes, time boxed outcomes. At 1 month, what's a salesperson going to have done? At 3 months, what this salesperson going to have done? And at 1 month, when we put up the expectations Like, you know, we talked about market entry, right? We're really starting up again, right, in Canada. We have pipeline checkpoints and everything else, but every month we have milestone checkpoints. Did these things happen? Did a salesperson coming in generate this? Did these outcomes generate meetings? Those are all checkpoints along the way. So we can sit there at a month, at 3 months or 4 months and go, yeah, this is working, even though there's no outcomes yet, right? Because if we just said, well, the outcome is a blah, blah, blah revenue in 12 months, right? Like, and then if you're not there, like that's a problem, right? So it's the same thing with any experiment. Business case, you're really good at developing a mini business case for every experiment that you're going to do. That's something I figured out too late, right? I wish I would have figured it out 10 years ago, right? But outcomes. What are you trying to drive towards? What are the variables? And so anyway, I went off on a here, but hire 2 salespeople if you can.
And let's talk a bit about let's call it the funnel, for lack of a better word.
And I'm talking B2B right now, but like obviously
yeah.
B2C, a lot of this still applies. And I can get into that too.
You know, you're at this stage where you've got something, you're at 5 million, 3 million, something like that in revenue. Where do you invest in the funnel? Right? Because again, I just want to close stuff, right? So I'm going to go and get a bunch of closers and close stuff. Like what?
Listen, again, Shub's perspective.
Yeah.
It's always top of funnel. It's demand gen over everything. Because you can go get success people who are great at taking control of an active input. You can go get project people who are great at taking control of an active input. There are such a small number of people who in an early stage or scaling company can execute demand. That is the most important thing. Like Sam Blond talks about this, CRO Brex, like a lot. Like it's everything else is solvable. So like for me, I have not reached the stage in my career where I don't believe that what I'm saying is true. Like at any stage, right? Like you have to pour stuff into the top, and you have to pour 10 times as much stuff as you think. Because Ray came out as a founder, did those first 10 deals. I don't know, I wasn't in the room with Ray. I'm guessing there was only like 18 actual opportunities. And Ray was just really fabulous as a founder, working them and closing them, right?
Yep.
And so then Ray thinks that, okay, well, I want to do 5 times as much revenue next year. Well, 5 times 10 deals is 50 deals, 5 times 18, I just need 90 opportunities, right? No, you need 900 opportunities. Like, and I'm not even exaggerating, right? Like that's the type of mindset you have to have, because the worst case scenario, if you have way too much top of funnel stuff, is you stress your system, right? Like your product can't keep up, your success people can't keep up. And when I've heard people say that's the worst problem a startup can have, I'm like, that's definitely not the worst problem a startup can have. The worst problem a startup can have is all those people have nothing to do. So fill the top always first, always first, always first. Maybe at some point I become a little more balanced about this, right? And that's not what I wake up and think about all the time. But I haven't reached that point yet. So I always go top, always. Like, and I would rather have a founder or 2 founders, because there's a co-founder, spend more of their time on the success part and the product part and the implementation part if I've got a bunch of stuff filling the top of the funnel.
So organizationally, like you're building your org, you know, there's so many different schools of thought on, you know, you got sales, you got marketing, you got product, you got, and you know, I find in a lot of organizations, marketing is just this thing they stick on the side of it and yell at them because there's not enough demand.
They don't understand it.
Yeah. So yeah, how would you structure? And again, we're scaling, we're not massive yet, but you know, what's your preferred structure?
We're scaling. Let's call it, sub on the journey from 1 to 5 million revenue. Kind of Ray, that you were talking about, you taking scenario. In those cases, I believe very strongly in keeping sales, success, and marketing together, squished together under one person. Like there is no need to have a head of marketing, a head of sales, and a head of success when you have $1 million to 5 million revenue. It makes no sense to me. Like you have one person who
And just
owns.
to clarify, when you say success, customer success, old days used to be called support or
Yeah,
just,
yeah. Well, I
yeah.
actually think of support as something different. So a
Oh, okay.
success is actually the realization of the value that I marketed or sold to you. Like,
Right.
and then support is, okay, you realize that value. Now you're just coming back because you need help. Yeah. So
Got it.
support can sit on its own as far, I mean, like that to me is a different skill set.
Okay.
But when it comes to early stages, I believe really strongly in a B2B scenario, because in a B2B scenario, what your early marketer is doing is sales. Like they're only doing sales enablement, honestly, like in a very early scenario. They might be doing some field work and and sales enablement. If you have this incredible like product led thing that is, you have a B2B product that's closer to B2C, then I flip that, right? Then marketing is driving all the demand and success becomes like the enabler for marketing, basically, right? But if it's a B2B play, you got one or two kind of intermediate marketers early days. I think in the same way that people overhire a salesperson early days, they do the same thing for marketing. Our head of marketing like has a really great perspective on this. She's like, you don't need me when you're early. She's like, you need me when you want to go from 5 to 20 or 10 to 25 or 20 to 50, or that's
Yeah.
when you um and so yeah, I believe really strongly early days that you keep that stuff together instead of sales, marketing, success. It's all wound together.
Yep. No, it's good. Yeah, and it really doesn't let the salesperson off the hook or the sales. Somebody isn't off the hook because they sold it, and somebody else
That's right. Yeah.
has to make sure that customer's happy.
Yeah.
And that's how you get churn. Uh, any, I think you have experience in this area. One question that's coming in is just this difference between product versus service. So, a very large percentage of our economy is service.
Yeah.
And I guess theoretically software could fit under there, but even just classical selling hours of somebody's time.
Yeah.
Any experience on, is there a difference in the
No,
customer
it's still a
acquisition?
product. You should think of it as a product. Like it's the product you're selling is just the consultant or the hours or the service.
Yeah.
Closer you bundle it or position it as a product, also the easier it is to sell, right? Like, and so you're like when you're selling services, so like listen, the motion is the same. Like the execution of revenue is different because it's far more tied into like how you execute against that engagement, right? So
Right.
like I'm selling a 2-year project or 1-year project, like I don't realize the revenue up front, right? As an example. But everything up until that point is very, very similar. And if you don't productize your service, then you will not have salespeople. You would get into the exact same trap that Ray did when he was early stage, because you will then not have salespeople who can actually sell. You will just have relationship builders, and in those cases, what happens is your sales engineer is your salesperson, right? Like the person who scopes, establishes credibility, shows them what the outcome could look like because they've done a bunch of mock-ups and all that stuff. Hey, well, if you get engaged with us, this is what the project plan will look like. Oh, here's your project manager. You're gonna get to talk to them for 5 minutes before you do the engagement. I think this is the type of service we're talking about, but from a professional service perspective, like bundle it up, package it up, like here's what we did for this guy is a slide. That's a product that you did for that guy, right? Even if it's different, then you're just doing what Ray did in the room as a founder, going, hey, we did this for these guys. We know you're slightly different, but we can make those changes from a service delivery perspective. But if you don't have that, hey, we did this thing for somebody already as a product, it is incredibly difficult to sell. Otherwise, you're sitting there going in and saying, Ray, what can we help you with? Now, if you're PwC or you're Deloitte or you're one of the big four and they're coming to you for a myriad of things, that is a pure relationship sale, right? Your partner, it's ultimately a relationship and a belief in just overall firm capability. But if you're a startup or scale up and you are selling services, design services, you're an agency, like whatever the scenario is, yeah, think of it as a product.
So a very typical revenue curve is the S shape, right? You just, it's slow growth, then high growth, and it slows down again. How do you know? So Zayzoom recently made the decision to put resources and investment into an entire new market.
Yeah.
I'm sure you haven't saturated the US market.
No.
How do you make that decision that
Yeah.
it's time to take risk and expand into Canada versus just going deeper and deeper and deeper in the US?
Yeah. So whether it's new market or new product,
Yeah.
look, the first thing is if you try to make the decision um, in a straight line way that you make an analogy for your existing business, you will never do anything new. It's always going to be more productive to pour money into the thing that is working than to pour money into something new. So new market, new product, always 1,000,000,000%, right? Like, so you have to first of all go, that's not the rubric we're going to use. We are not going to go, hey, if normally we spend $1 over here and get $3 out. We show us a way where we'll spend $1 and get $3 out over the same time horizon on this new product in the market. Can't happen. So what you have to do is you have to, like, your step one is going to build a business case. So whether there's a new market entry, new product entry, you build a business case. So business case involves and feels very similar to maybe what you did when you were starting up your core business, except you should know a lot more and be a lot better at business cases now, which is, what does the target market look like? What is the market opportunity? Who's maybe been a player in this market that if you're a new category that tried and failed, who's been players in this market that are seeing success, that are seeing traction? Are there signals from the people who already have relationships with your target market that this is a thing? So again, you can't, I mean, you can go do surveys and such that say there's an appetite for your product. I personally never really put a lot of faith in a survey. Like if I ask Ray,
Yeah.
hey, Ray, would you like access to your money in advance of payday? You'll say yes. Yeah, like, yeah, of course I would. Yeah, that doesn't actually tell me if you're going to buy the thing that you need, right? Hey, Ray, as an employer, would you like your employees to feel less stressed about their finances? Yeah, 100%. Sign me up, right? That's a lot different than making a buying decision. So what you are looking for is different kinds of signals, right? And so now you have to build a business case, and then you have to commit to an investment. You're basically seed funding either a new market or a new product. And that business case, back to what I talked about earlier, should have stage gates along the way. So we are going to invest X. For that investment in 3 months, we will not have a return on our investment, but we should definitely see that these 14 checkpoints have been hit. If these 14 checkpoints have been hit, we're going to release another tranche of investing. You just have to be 10 times more sophisticated than you were when you were a seed round startup, where you were just kind of just like shooting from the hip in every single direction, as you should. But this time around, you shouldn't do that. Like, you're actually not trying to determine like if you can make your product work. Like, you don't, like, it's not hacking something together to make it work, right?
Yeah.
It is actually going right to product market fit, right?
And I think this is exactly what Zazian's doing, in my opinion, is you haven't waited for your current market to plateau.
Oh.
Now you're in panic mode.
Yeah, then it's a desperation. It's a Portland
right.
stone play, right? We have competitors that have come up to Canada, and I can bet absolute like money that it is oh my goodness, we can't grow in our current market anymore because we don't know how to grow.
Right.
And so, and that's a tale as old. Well, okay, to your point, Ray, if you are entering a new market because your revenue is already flat, it's already too late because you're not going to see the result in 2 years, right? Like, so like it's, yeah, you have to look for early signals as best you can. And then the most important thing is you got to be willing to make a commit. You got to be making a financial commit and a people commit, because you probably got to put some people who would continue to accelerate your growth in your core market. You got to put a couple of those people on this other thing you're doing.
Yeah.
And so that's a big,
and I think that this requires some vision, right? So old BlackBerry story. So when we first launched a device, it wasn't even called BlackBerry. It was viewed as the world as a two-way pager. And those of you who are over 40 might remember this. We had two customers, a $100 million customer and a $50 million customer, right? And this is, the previous year we had $8 million in revenue. And instead of saying, man, we got to go all in on this to a paging market, the vision of the founders was, no, we want to get into wireless email. So we invested in BlackBerry, and literally we would celebrate when a salesperson sold 5 BlackBerries to a CIO or an IT shop. And that was worth $2,500 to us. We had $100 million customer and a $50 million customer that we were keeping alive, but not over investing in. And it was just this belief that there's a bigger market someplace else. And I think that level, a question came in around like, how do you build the next BlackBerry or the next Zayzoon? And I think a necessary piece, it's not all you need, is the vision to do that, which not everyone can have, and not every opportunity.
Listen, Tate, who founded Zayzoon, I say is like, and a great founder is incredibly indexed to action today. Like, what am I doing right now to make a change? And is really great at seeing things 5 years out that everybody else can't see. They're probably honestly not great at the part in between, right? Like the 12-month play. That's why they go get operators who can do 12 months, right? But yeah, the vision piece, whether it's a product, like you have to be willing to go, like we have to, like in our case, we are a B2C product, a B2B go-to-market. And yeah, we're going to start delivering B2B, more B2B stuff. It's a very similar scenario to what you just described with BlackBerry. We're going to get way more excited about like, hey, we did this thing that's going to generate revenue in 2 years, because like that's when it becomes absolutely key to have a clear vision and strategy for the company. I know strategy is like a word a lot of us roll their eyes out, including a guy who's got it in his title. But yeah, you have to have this framework saying this is non-negotiable. We're going to do this. This seems crazy to invest time, energy, and money into today. But yeah, like we built the case, we built the vision. That's who we are going to be, and we're going to get there. And I love the idea of celebrating, like, hey, we sold $2,000 of BlackBerries because, yeah, you were incenting. It's not just monetarily incenting the right behavior. You're culturally incenting the behavior that you wanted to drive the vision forward, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it sounds like Zayzoon kind of had a customer acquisition strategy around partners. Is that a fair statement?
100%.
I see a lot of companies who have 5-pronged approach to demand gen or to acquisition. How do you land on that? First of all, is that the correct approach to pick one and pour money into that one?
I mean, so when I came to Zayzoon, I was like, this partner thing is great, but it's not going to do the trick. We have to have a direct motion as well. And then 8 months after tried to build the direct motion, I was like, that's stupid. I could have generated way more from the partner. So part of it is like trying things, figuring it out, but being fast enough to know that what you tried is wrong, right? And then you lean in. Now, people will go, well, you just have a partner-led strategy, because I'm a huge believer in de-risking your growth too, right? Like, if I talk to a startup and they've got, well, actually what BlackBerry you just talked about, like, yeah, we got 150 million revenues off the back of 2 customers. That is actually 150 million revenue is incredible. Having on the back of 2 potential clients is the worst, right? Like, it's scary, right? So de-risk your growth. So in our case, we, it's partner driven, but there's a couple hundred partners that make up that revenue piece, right? So you want to target like at least 1/3 of them, right, are really driving the bulk of your, like a lot of the revenues. That way you've committed to a singular strategy, go to market, but you've de-risked your growth. Now, over time, I was too early to build the direct demand. Like I thought I had to do it early, but it's actually, we've been starting to build that up more lately, right? Because like, now you've got a brand play, now you've got like way better stories to tell, right? So, I think you always want to have like multiple marketing channels that are functioning. In our case, effectively, you think about a partner, it's really just a marketing and sales channel, right? That you've established. But I think like, again, kind of back to that point I made, that founders are like their greatest trait is impatience and their worst trait is patience. Like, sometimes what happens is you so commit to an approach and it doesn't work, right? Like, and then it's too late, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of times you undercommit to something that is, you see this all the time. Like, oh, we're starting to get some traction over here. I've done this twice. Oh, I'm starting to get this traction over here. I better go build this other thing out. Wrong. Early days, 20 of you, 30 of you, something's working. Make it work 10 times better, right? Like if it's green, go, right? Like that's the rule. If it's on plan, keep pouring into it until you start to see that it's going from like dark green to light green, and that's the right time. It's not when that channel is red or yellow, right? That you start establishing those other approaches. But yeah, lean into what's working, right? Don't think you have to do 3 different go-to-market approaches early days, right?
And a great book for those who like this stuff. It's called Traction. There's 2 good books called Traction, actually, but this one's by Gabriel Weinberg. And he really just talks about, you've got so many options for traction and customer acquisition. Here's a process to go and pick one that's going to work for you. And frankly, early on at BlackBerry, like, we did no advertising.
Yep.
Our customer acquisition strategy was giving away free BlackBerries. So I had a $250,000 budget to give away 5,000 BlackBerries to influencers. So the word influencer is not a new word.
They had phones,
Yeah, and the most famous one or the most successful one was Jack Welch when he was the CEO of GE. And every Monday morning, we would have a titan of industry call us and say, I was golfing with Jack on the weekend. How do I get one of those? And this was our only customer acquisition strategy. And the brilliance of it was, when the CEO has a BlackBerry, guess who gets one next? Everybody underneath that.
I get one. Yeah.
Exactly. And it just flows down. So now that was magical, and not everybody's magical, but has that opportunity. But finding that unique, and what I've found in my career is, it's rarely what your competitors are doing.
Yeah.
Especially if you're trying to attack a bigger competitor, don't just play by their playbook. Find a novel playbook.
Yeah. No, that's great. 100 all that.
Great. I think they want us to wrap up, but
wrap it up. I could do 2 more hours.
I know.
You don't need to wrap up right away. It's more of a gradual transition into 11:40. It's a fun time for me to come back in, though, based on what you just shared, Ray, because your story about Jack it prompted me to kind of scratch my head and think, when did I get my first BlackBerry? Right? Like, there's enough gray hairs on this head to be able to ask that question. And you and I have had this debate before, like the sort of show and tell before, where I pull out, so I'm not home right now. I'm at Motive Digital downtown. I could pull out my old Motorola brick phone, which I actually still have just for fun in my, the old analog, because I did have that in the 90s. I never had the briefcase, but I'm trying to remember if my first RIM product was before GE acquired the company that I was with, or whether it was immediately afterwards, but it was definitely somewhere around 2002.
And I will, not to the final word, I'll give that to you, Shad, but I will say that what RIM did remarkably well was shift from this crazy product innovation company to this scaling customer acquisition company. And that is also what killed them. It was a hard switch. So somehow, as you start to scale and you start to invest more and more, as you should, in sales and marketing, you have to maintain that innovation DNA that got you there.
Stop making new stuff,
because you're going to need it again. And and I think that's often there's a great, I think earlier in the week we had Charles Plant. You should follow this gentleman on LinkedIn. He writes a lot about Canadian scale ups, and he has all sorts of amazing stats, and so it's all evidence-based. But one of them was, Canadian companies underinvest in sales and marketing relative to the US companies, and they overinvest in R&D. We just can't help but believing, if it's a better product, we will win. And so yeah, that would be my takeaway from this, is you have to invest in this stuff. It doesn't just
that light bulb went on literally in the space of 10 minutes for me 4 years ago, looking at our sales plan, and I was like, hell am I doing? Like, why am I doing one a month for 12 months? Why am I not doing 12 in 1 month?
Yeah.
It was the biggest unlock for me. It sounds so dumb to say that was the biggest unlock, but it was the biggest unlock. It's like, what are you doing?